have called this press conference and able to share with you, with the press and with the community, the details of the protocol that was signed between the St. Martin and the Netherlands by Minister of Justice, Mr. Dennis Richardson, representing the Council of Ministers, and also with the proposed changes that were agreed upon or that was discussed and agreed on the Integrity Chamber. This press conference actually was intended to be called some time back, but due to travels, crossing agendas of the minister and my person, we only are able to do it today, for which we are grateful that you had the patience to wait. I would like now to turn the floor over to the Minister of Justice, Mr. Dennis Richardson.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I am glad that you're here today because it gives us the opportunity to clarify the agreement that was reached in the Netherlands on a Saturday afternoon and to eliminate misunderstanding as to the background, the reason why, and what really took place. As you all know, a draft national ordinance on the Integrity Chamber was presented to Parliament. And that draft national ordinance was also the result of negotiations with the Dutch, with one notice with that, namely that we did not reach complete agreement with the Dutch on the national ordinance that in the end was presented to Parliament. There remained a number of issues open, and those issues were the protection of the rights of persons and control over the Integrity Chamber. The Dutch government did not agree to the proposals that we had put on the table in that regard. In fact, the Dutch government wanted all those things removed because they felt that it would hinder the Integrity Chamber in its operations. And the second group of topics that we did not agree on was concerned the Dutch offer to strengthen the justice chain on St. Martin with the necessary strings attached. Because naturally they were going to pay for all of it and therefore felt that they should decide exactly what would happen. But knowing this government and knowing the people that they're discussing with, we did not feel the same about it. So we said, well, this is our version, this is our vision on how it should happen, and that is what we presented to the Parliament of St. Martin, taking into consideration that if the Dutch in the end would agree to what we present, they would be part of the Integrity Chamber operations. And if they did not agree, then their role in the Integrity Chamber would be eliminated. There are articles in the draft law that has been presented to Parliament that states. So anyone stating that Parliament is not aware of the government negotiating with the Dutch on the Integrity Chamber has either been sleeping or is consciously taking the facts in a complete wrong direction. Parliament knew we were discussing this issue with the Netherlands, and Parliament also knew the importance of reaching an agreement with the Netherlands, because what was at the Kingdom Council of State at that moment, none other than a general kingdom measure to impose on St. Martin higher supervision in the area of integrity. In first instance, that draft kingdom general measure even had statements towards how they would also impose their will on St. Martin where it concerns the strengthening of the justice chain. After months of negotiations, we eliminated all the arguments and in the end said, well, if you don't want it, take it or leave it. And as a result of that, we were on a collision course with the Dutch government because we were completely convinced that the Kingdom Council of State would call the kingdom measure without legal basis. But as you know, that is not enough for the Kingdom Council of Ministers to stop doing what they want to do. They can put aside the advice, because more than an advice it is not. They can put aside the advice of the Kingdom Council of State and still do what they want. And St. Martin's position has been on that, if in the advice of the Kingdom Council of State says that the Kingdom measure lacks legal basis, St. Martin will not comply with whatever they want. And therefore, you understand, we were on a complete collision course at that point in time with the Dutch government. Not to say the Kingdom government, because all they do is use their power within the Kingdom Council of State to dictate to the countries what they want. So we considered it very important to still strive for an agreement with the Dutch government that would avoid such a constitutional confrontation in the kingdom. But it would not only be a constitutional confrontation, it would really completely disrupt the relationship between St. Martin and the Dutch government in the future. And that is clear, I think, to anyone who understands a little bit how these things work. So what did we achieve by reaching an agreement on a Saturday evening in the Netherlands, for which I specifically flew in on the request of the Vice President of the Kingdom Council of State, Mr. Peter Hindona? What we have received, and if I summarize it to the point, is that the Dutch government has committed itself to accept the solutions that were presented by the government of St. Martin to Parliament. Nothing less, nothing more. St. Martin has not committed itself to anything that could consider Dutch putting anything new in front of us that was not already on the table in Parliament. The only difference is that in the negotiations that we had with the Netherlands, they were objecting to the individual protection. I'm sorry. They were protesting the measure of individual protection that we were given to persons that were subjected to an integrity investigation, because they felt it would hamper the operations of the integrity chamber. And that discussion with the Dutch went as follows. St. Martin first had a supervisory committee on the integrity chamber, because we felt that the supervisory committee could get down to the nitty-gritty of whatever they're doing and make whatever recommendations to correct that is necessary, goes further than the individual legal protection that you can get, because the committee has no limits in its supervisory powers over the integrity chamber. In that way, we could prevent that individuals have to go to lawyers, go to courts, and all those kind of difficult procedures to be able to get the protection they need. The Dutch rejected that. They did not want that. They felt it would hamper, as I said again, the operations of the integrity chamber. We said, well, you can choose. It's either the supervisory committee, or we're going to do heightened protection to the individuals. So they rejected also the last. What they wanted was an unhampered operations by the integrity chamber. And we know that who live in a small community, what an investigation, an unhampered investigation can do to people's lives. So we absolutely objected that and were not intending to comply with that. In first instance, they chose for the individual protection, but later also came back on that and said, no, they didn't want that either. And we said, well, then we will go to our Parliament with the law as we see fit. And in that, we had put up the individual protection, although we preferred the supervisory committee as the best method of protection on the island. Like I said, under the chairmanship, mediatorship of Piet Hein Donner, the vice president of the Kingdom Council of State, the Dutch agreed to a supervisory committee instead of the individual protection, which was, as far as we're concerned, something we really wanted in first instance anyhow. And in the further negotiations over the help to St. Martin and the justice change, they also agreed to all the plans and ideas and suggestions that St. Martin had, and therefore we are again on the right track on how things should happen when it comes to the justice chain. I'll be more explicit later on. So I've made an inventory for you of the results of this agreement that we have now reached with the Dutch. What was achieved with this agreement? The Dutch intention to appoint all members of the Integrity Chamber is off the books. The Dutch intention to send their civil servants and National Security Service officers to St. Martin as support staff for the Integrity Chamber is not possible anymore. Their intention to give the Integrity Chamber vast discretionary powers unhindered in any way, that chamber now has to work according to the format of our law. The intention to allow the Integrity Chamber to operate completely unhindered in the interest of so-called efficiency and effectiveness, thereby skirting the rule of law, is not possible anymore. The intention to eliminate any form of protection for persons who might be subjected to an investigation has been rejected. The proposal to bypass the governor and our screening agencies, which is the Public Prosecutor's Office and the National Security Service, with the screening of ministers, directors of government-owned companies, and civil servants, and have that done by the Integrity Chamber, has been prohibited, has been prevented, has been eliminated. By the way, it is a crazy thought to have the ones advising you to be also the ones screening you. So that's not going to happen. The General Kingdom measure of higher supervision, and that is the great success of what we've achieved on integrity matter, is now off the table. In the area of justice, the intention to make the RST, the Detective Corporations Team, and the Koninklijke Marechaussee, the Royal Marechaussee, independent investigative agencies is no longer an option. The intention to expand their tasks to practically speaking all areas of police work has been thwarted. The intention to increase control of the Attorney General and Curaçao on the investigations has been limited to the possibilities that are presently in our laws. The intention to strengthen only the office of the Attorney General in Curaçao and increase direction of the Public Prosecutor's Office here in St. Martin from there has been blunted due to the obligation to consult more intensively with our own local offices, which has been, and I can tell you that I've experienced that in the last months, has been the case. Strengthening of the justice chain includes also helping our local enforcement agencies, KPSM, the police force, the prison, the MOT, the Financial Intelligence Unit, the National Detective Agency, to upgrade themselves and improve their quality, and to obtain the necessary support and training that have been limited due to budgetary constraints of St. Martin. A plus in the view of the recent uptick in the development of crime on St. Martin. For 3 years, the pressure on the budgets of St. Martin for law enforcement and integrity will be shared. And that means that the Minister of Finance will be a little bit happier and will not receive the immense pressure that he was having from the Ministry of Justice for us to comply with agreements that we made as we came up to 10-10-10. Now, another point of contention, if I follow the news, is that we have compelled Parliament to take a decision before the ending of June. Anyone who understands constitutional law knows that a Council of Ministers in no way, with agreement with anybody, can take away the powers and authority of Parliament. The date of the 30th of June was set because the Dutch government said, we are not going to wait indefinitely until St. Martin establishes its law. And the question was posed to us, within what period of time do you think that would be possible? And given the fact that we are at the point of debating the law in Parliament, we estimated that that would take about a month, and therefore the 31st of June came up. And that's to say, then we would like to have that in the contract. It was an important point for them, a crucial point for them, because to them, we are not completely to be trusted, and we probably would negotiate and postpone and not have quorum and all those kind of things, not to handle the law indefinitely, and they were not planning to go along with that. That is the reason. It is what they call a term of order for decision making. If Parliament does not want to establish the law within the term we agreed, they have the authority to do so. But then you also have to accept the consequences. That the Dutch might say, you have no real reason not to do it within that period of time. You really don't want to do it, and therefore the General Kingdom measure could come on the table again. The law we have presented to Parliament, we think is defendable and is reasonable. We understand, we've said that before, we understand the reservations that many members of Parliament have because it is something new. It is something new within the total kingdom, but it is not something new for the region. Many of the independent countries around us have integrity chambers in some form or fashion. All the way from Jamaica, all the way up to Antigua, Trinidad, Bahamas, Bermuda, Barbados, have it. And it was recommended to us, not by the Dutch, not from the PVC report, it was a recommendation to us from our own committee that we established on integrity. And let us not forget, we as Council of Ministers have no reason to doubt that Parliament wants this because they have declared prepared to execute the recommendations of all committees, even those of PwC. So the Audit Chamber, the Witt-Sampson Committee, and the PVC. And we are still awaiting the report from Transparency International. So we have no reason to assume that is not the case. But again, as I've stated before, the Council of Ministers cannot take away the powers of Parliament. If Parliament does not want this law, if Parliament does not want an integrity chamber, then they have the power to not establish this ordinance. They have the power to change it fundamentally. They have the power to change it cosmetically. We, as Council of Ministers, cannot take that away from Parliament. The question is, are you prepared to accept the consequences? And if the law that we have proposed to Parliament has more of St. Martin in it, in fact, the greatest part of that law has St. Martin in it, and offers protection to whoever is subjected to an integrity investigation, would you let that pass you by and choose for a kingdom measure that takes away all authority that you have in this area? I do not think that would be a responsible decision of Parliament. But it's not for me to decide, it is for Parliament to decide. These are the choices we have to make, sometimes tough choices. Sometimes we want to be completely free in this world, but that is not the case. We have had to accept many laws and treaties in this country because, for instance, of terrorism in the world that we otherwise might never have put into place. But it's part of an international agreement. We have to comply with recommendations, international recommendations on the fighting of money laundering and terrorism. We can choose not to do so, but the consequence is that the country will be blacklisted and our economy will tank because we will not be able to do business with the rest of the world. Those are the tough choices governments and parliaments are sometimes confronted with. And this is one of these tough choices. And we feel that we can defend the choice we've put before Parliament. And we should be offered the opportunity to defend it. If in the end Parliament is not satisfied, like I said, they have the authority to do as they please. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you. CJ.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister and Minister Richardson, for your opening remarks. Let's open the floor for any questions the media might have. Alita, you have the floor.
Thank you, Cedric. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Good afternoon, Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you for the overview of the protocol. Can you say when you will be going to Parliament? You did mention the second week, and the second week starts next week.
Well, naturally, the establishment of a date for parliamentary meeting is not up to the Council of Ministers, but I thought it would have been possible in the second week, which is the coming week, to do so, but it is dependent on whether Parliament is prepared to do so.
But you've put the request.
But the request has been, the Prime Minister has sent a request to continue with the handling of the law in Parliament.
And also the copy of the protocol and the changes were approved in the Council of Ministers, and they were subsequently forwarded to Parliament.
Let me take away a misunderstanding that has been in the press in that regard as well. I read in the press, although it was not said to us directly, that we did not even have the courtesy to send the documents to Parliament. That is not true. This Saturday, the protocol and the signing off on the draft law was done. On Monday, we tried to have a meeting, but with the coalition, but that was not possible because of the many people that were not there. On Tuesday, it was handled and decided on in the Council of Ministers, and on Wednesday, it was sent to Parliament. Today, to this day, I do not know if the parliamentarians have received from their own secretariat the document. But that is how they should never be able to receive it from third parties, because it was sent immediately to Parliament at the first possible opportunity.
And maybe just to clarify another point, I think this one needs clarification. The documents were sent, but there's two sets of documents, okay? The changes that was suggested and agreed upon on the Integrity Chamber, on the law, the Integrity Chamber, the law, and those were sent. Those are the ones that will be attached to the law, and that Parliament will have the opportunity to either approve or reject if they want. But the protocol that was signed for the maintenance of justice, that was signed as for the Minister of Justice, and that does not need any approval from any Parliament before it is signed, to avoid the misunderstanding that we've picked up in the reporting in various newspapers. Oh, that's clear.
Yeah, well, that's what was said to the newspaper. It's not what the newspapers wrote.
Yeah. What was said to them?
Okay. Justice Minister, you spoke about what brought the protocol about, what are the changes that have been agreed to, but can you speak a little bit more about what would happen, for instance, if Parliament says, we're not going to deal with this law, we don't like what's in it, what are the consequences for St. Martin?
Well, naturally, it's not for me to decide. That's a decision the Dutch themselves would have to take. So we can only speculate as to what they will do. Given the forcefulness up to that moment that the Dutch have approached St. Martin on this matter, given the exclamations that were made, statements that were made in the Dutch Second Chamber, and the pressure that was put on Minister Plasterk in this regard, I can only assume that they will come back and proceed to establish the General Kingdom measure. That is all that I can assume at this moment.
Something not related to the protocol, but you did mention money laundering when you were speaking earlier, but it's one of the treaties we had to live up to. You were recently in Trinidad for the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. St. Martin, of course, was up for review on, I think, the 40 recommendations that, as a MOT, we should comply with. Can you say what were the outcomes of that meeting?
Well, St. Martin is in the third phase of compliance. Most of the countries are in the fourth phase of compliance. They were impressed with the progress that St. Martin has been making, and with compliance with the different recommendations of the FATF, CFATF, the task force. We have to meet some more recommendations by November of this year. We are going to put a planning together to achieve that. Money laundering, financing of terrorism, focus points, but also in the TRIP report, the matter of human smuggling and human trafficking are focus points internationally. And until now, as I've said, we have been making serious progress. They're really impressed by the progress St. Martin is reaching. The only criticism that we have received in this regard is really from the TRIP report. That in the actual activities, so in actual investigation prosecution, they do not see sufficient activity. So therefore, the strengthening of the justice chain is also important in that regard, because if we strengthen the justice chain, more activities in that regard can be undertaken. We can then also say, yes, we've done whatever we can, we've investigated whatever we can. The amount of cases that you assume should play are not there, or if they're there, we've tackled them. So that is the importance of having the strengthening of the justice chain on St. Martin as well. It plays indirectly into the international compliance that we have to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your questions. Leader, Bibi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Cedric, and good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister and Minister of Justice, Dennis Richardson. Parliament made some statements, certain members of Parliament, for example, after this, I don't know how to describe the Central Committee meeting when the draft document was presented to them. But I believe they said that you were supposed to go back, make some changes, and then return to them. That did not happen. I think after that, there was a request from the Netherlands to state that can we hold off on Parliament taking a decision, and then there comes a signing of a protocol. Do you believe there's some sort of miscommunication as to what actually transpired for the holding off of the for Parliament taking a decision, and then now you have a signed protocol?
Well, there were many reasons why after the Central Committee meeting, the delay to hold a parliamentary meeting took place. In the first place, I would say there was a lot of traveling going on, also of our parliamentarians. That was one. But only after the Vice President of the Kingdom Council of State asked for some space for negotiations, that from the side of the Council of Ministers, we said, well, okay, we will not push for exact date until that those consultations under his chairmanship, under his mediatorship would take place. But the calling of a meeting of Parliament is not done by the Council of Ministers. That is done by Parliament itself, by the chair itself. So it's just whether you're pushing for it as Council of Ministers or not. And we didn't push for it in view of the request of the Vice President of the Kingdom Council of State to give him some space so that he can try and negotiate an agreement with us, so that this whole confrontation at the Kingdom level did not need to take place, that the Kingdom of State does not need to advise, and whatever measures then might or might not have come down would not take place. He was successful in his mediatorship as far as I'm concerned, and I think we've scored a mighty victory in the debate, because everything has to be done within the present rules and laws of the country. And like I've said at the beginning, it is not that St. Martin on Saturday signed off to a Dutch option. No, the Dutch government signed off to a St. Martin option. What is better than that?
Do you believe, even though I think a letter was sent to Parliament informing them about the request to hold on and not to continue and to pass the draft law that you presented, do you think it was wise to tell Parliament, well, listen, we are negotiating, assuming that they don't know, and then when you were ready to go and sign off on this document, at least inform them and say, we have reached an agreement and we are going to sign off?
Well, that is exactly what happened. They knew that we were negotiating, because we stated it, but it also, even the Dutch Minister Plasterk stated it. Mm-hmm. He stated it to the Second Chamber, he stated it to the Kingdom Council of Ministers, he stated to the public, he himself stated that while we are on a collision course, the negotiations are still ongoing, and that is something we stated as well. And like I've just demonstrated to you with the dates, immediately after, at the first moment, we sent the documents to Parliament. So saying that you're not informed or not timely informed doesn't cut it with me.